Welcome to Coleman Report Live. I'm Bob Coleman. We're talking Main Street and the small business lenders who help it grow. CEO, founder, Chris Hearn, head commercial out of Orlando, and Katie Watucky, our editor. Chris, what did your great governor just announce out of Florida?
20 minutes ago, you can go to bars, but you cannot consume alcohol there. Hence, probably not sure why you'd go to bars. For the food, I'm sure.
What's the point now?
Right.
Yeah, there's rumblings in California. What's Governor Newsom doing, Katie? He said they may close everything again.
I don't know. I haven't really heard. We're kind of doing well where I'm at, but it seems like LA is just kind of a mess right now.
Yep.
Yeah, well, it just and the hits keep on coming. That's
gotta love 2020, right?
I know it. I love it. Lance is making his escape. What are you're going to the Ozarks? Where are you going, Lance?
First of all, this is the first I'm broadcasting from a vehicle, and I'm not driving.
That's good. Yeah, that could be interesting. We could have a live stream of the police going, Mr. Sexton, what are you doing? Hey, welcome all. We appreciate your support. There is a certificate. We have a lot of information. Let's go to it. Lance, I'm going to start off with you. You have a couple of webinars coming up. What are you going to be talking about?
Well, the first one is a very important one, especially as we go through this pandemic, because Chris would probably agree with me. We're all going to see some challenged SBA loans as this year comes to an end, as well as into 2021. So understanding how to get paid on your SBA guarantee is very important for every bank or every financial institution, non-bank lender. So we're going to do one on preparing a 10-tab guarantee purchase package. Again, an important skill for you to have. And then we're going to follow that up with some details about the Main Street lending program on July 15th.
Very good. Obviously, we have a couple of Coleman products coming up. We have our franchise report as well as our training. Please take advantage of it. Chris, we'd love to have you on. We'd love to have a lender's perspective. What's going, your boots on the ground, what's happening to your customers and to overall how you perceive SBA lending?
Well, as I was saying before we jumped on, I think we're all about to go jump out of one fire into the frying pan, which is forgiveness. Two frying pans, forgiveness, and I think there's going to be a lot of demand for 7As between now and the end of September for people to get in and try to take advantage of the principal and interest payments from SBA as part of the CARES Act. So I think there's no rest for the weary, and there's a lot of weary people in SBA world right now. But as my grandmother, who I may have said last time, grew up a Mennonite farmer. She used to tell me when I was little all the time, you make hay when the sun shines out. So that's what you got to do.
Yeah, very good. Very
Absolutely.
good. Well, Chris, thank you for joining us. Let's see. Let's
Pleasure.
go to we have polls. On average, how long does it take to receive your PPP fees from the SBA?
And of course, Bob, we all know that it's supposed to be 3 days from, 3 days, Chris.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's supposed to be 3 days from an accepted 1502 report. I'm guessing 5 days is probably more likely.
3 days is at 3%. And you're right, Lance, 5 days. Chris, what's your experience?
I just got my first fees this morning. Of course, they came in ACH by loan. So we have thousands to go through. I'm very happy that we finally got paid. It took a month, but we finally got paid. So that's the important thing.
Well,
so
good.
now any brokers who are watching are going to immediately be on the phone and email to me as soon as we're done here, and they're going to be wanting to get paid right away. Next week is when we will start wiring funds out to loan agents.
Very good. Let's see. Lance, Michael, go back to the poll question, the results. Lance, I know we've talked about this, but let's do it again. If you're in that 19% column, what are you advising lenders?
Well, you need to go back into your 1502 dashboard and see if you have any messages, because part of the guidance that SBA issued is to make sure after you submit that PPP 1502 report, make sure that you check and see if there are any error messages. So there is a possibility you had an error in your report, and that's why you have not received your fees.
And you said to fix that to what changed, amend the May report and don't worry about June? Go through the logistics. How do we notify SBA what's going on?
Chris, you may know better than I.
Yeah, I
think
was going to
that
suggest reach out to Coleman directly because the errors aren't always being shown. Apparently, we had somehow there was a transposition error in terms of our lender ID. That was our issue. But yeah, I'd reach out to Coleman directly. I think there's a number of people, obviously by the poll results, that the system's not quite keeping up with this kind of demand at the moment. So reach out to them, and I think they can try and help you out.
Well,
And they will be kicking out, if you have individual loans, they'll be kicking them out, of course. So you won't get paid on that until you correct whatever the error is on.
yeah.
Very good. Poll question number 2, how much funding has Congress authorized for the Main Street Lending Program?
And I think, Bob, just understanding how many people are going to actually participate in Main Street lending is something I'd be curious about.
Mm-hmm.
Katie, what's the answer?
So a lot of you are guessing a lot lower. It's actually 600 billion.
Very good. Very good. Lance, excuse me. Chris, what is your take on Main Street Lending Program? Is Fountainhead going to participate in that program?
As presently structured, the answer would be no, which I think
Why
is
is that?
commonality. I just don't think there's quite the inducements to bring in the lending community to participate in the program as it's structured. I think there's a lot of PPP fatigue. I think there's a lot of concern about interacting with the Federal Reserve and Bank Boston on this when those are kind of unknowns for a lot of the lending community. Frankly, I'd like to see them kind of go back to the drawing board and see if they could push some of this through SBA, because that's already set up and you don't have to start from scratch. And they took a long time to roll this out, unfortunately.
Yeah.
I mean, I
Well,
know
and they don't have all the guidance on it as well.
Exactly.
Chris, for you to retain that 5%, how much of an imposition or a negative is that for your operation?
No, it's not that bad. I mean, we'd certainly be interested in it, but the problem is you're pretty limited in terms of the origination fees you can make. There's no secondary market for the guarantee. Yes, you're going to have a 95% takeout at par, which is great, but and maybe you can do some larger loans. But I just think compared to some of the other alternatives that are presently there, whether it's PPP, finalizing that, or what we just talked about in terms of what I expect will be 7As taking off, and hopefully we're still going to get some stimulus changes in the SBA's core programs, 504 and 7A, between now and, say, August or September. I just think there's a lot of options, and this is, sometimes human nature. When you're presented with multiple options, it's not easy to make decisions, and you probably stick with your own knitting a little bit. You stick with what you know. So this is a bit of an unknown still in many ways.
Lance, we've done, I don't know if you're on, but we've done the question, how many lenders were going to participate on this call? Katie, you may remember the number. I know it was under 20%. It was around 17, 18%. Was that correct, Katie?
Yeah, that sounds about right. I don't remember the exact number.
I keep seeing figures about a couple hundred lenders have gone through the registration process. So what does that mean? I don't know.
It's not being embraced.
No.
And of course, we've talked about there's a holdover or there's a fund left over in PPP, and they may
we may have
that.
PPP Part 3.0.
Yeah, or PPP
for
4.
certain, yeah, for certain borrowers. Yeah. So
do you know who your authorizing official is to recertify your CLS password? And there's a reason why I'm asking that question, Katie.
That's a very important question. If you're working in E-Tran or SBA 1, you need to know who your authorizing official is.
Yeah, and for your 20%, I believe, Lance, all they have to do is send an email to, it's in the notice. Bring up the next slide, Michael.
Well, if you're working in Cap Access, Financial Assist, CAFS, you can see who your authorizing official is on the opening. Yeah.
And what happens if that person has left the bank or the institution?
They're probably going to need to contact SBA and get a new authorizing official set up, because the problem is there's a recertification that needs to take place.
Well, that's why we're bringing this up. It starts, It's
if it doesn't, the problem, Bob, is if everybody's not recertified by August 7th, then they're going to get kicked out of cap access.
Kicked out. You're kicked out of the program. So go ahead and do that. And it starts on July 6th. So let's go ahead and get that done. Otherwise, you're going to have issues. Lance, we got some questions. What is the maturity date of a PPP loan?
After June the 5th, the maturity date is 5 years. The loans done before June the 5th are 2 years. The loans prior to June the 5th could be modified to 5 years, but it's going to take agreement between the lending institution and the borrower. The lending institution, if they agree with the borrower and they extend to 5 years, it's going to require E-Trans servicing action to do that. Chris, I don't know how you feel. I'm not sure how many loans that were done prior to June the 5th will get extended, but that option is there. And a scenario pops up, Bob. Let's say somebody got a PPP loan in first round. They go through forgiveness, and quite a bit of it is not forgiven. And all of a sudden, they've got 2-year terms and huge payments, and they can't make the payments. I would see a servicing action to extend it to 5 years to give them an opportunity to repay it. Now, I'm crossing my fingers for all of our people today that a majority of what they did gets forgiven and they don't face that. But the truth is there are going to be some loans.
Yeah.
And 2 years is
They're going to
pretty
be some
short term.
Yeah, the larger PPP loans, when I was running those through E-Tran and putting the payments amount in, it took my breath away a few times and Chris, I'm sure you're the same way. When you look at that payment, you're like, boy, I hope they don't ever have to do this.
Yeah. We actually in the last couple of days this week, we've had a couple people ask about if we would change back. Again, we're looking at it. I'm not necessarily opposed to doing it from time to time, but I might want to, as you brought up, Lance, I might want to wait and see what the forgiveness looks like and really kind of determine at that point if we should modify.
Hey, we have a new star student at Raman. Thank you very much. He has a question. I'm going to throw it to you, Chris. Please be clear if the 30th deadline for PPP is for getting an E-Trend number or for accepting the application. Logistically, what has to occur by next Tuesday, Chris?
You have to have a complete submission into your choice of lender, and they have to actually upload the data into E-Tran, and you have to get the number by midnight on Monday. And if you don't get it, my understanding is you're out of luck. The system is effectively
and we had John Riosty on yesterday. He said there's a chance it may be extended, but on terms of priorities in Congress, what Congress wants to do it's going to be difficult in terms of getting it done.
Yeah, I wouldn't count on it. I mean, the bigger issue is going to be, which is a lot of lenders, of course, will put information in E-Tran, using the borrower's EIN, for instance, at a certain dollar amount. And then once they've completely gone through reviewing everything and now they're preparing closing documents, those dollar amounts sometimes change, in which case you've got to go back into E-Tran and you've got to modify. The question I have, and I don't know that we have an answer, we've got a couple emails out to SBA about this, is we're assuming that we'll be able to go back into E-Tran and modify those loan amounts
After the okay.
But we don't know after the June 30th, but we really don't know. So I know we can certainly cancel if we had to withdraw someone because of fraud, for instance, but you certainly aren't going to be able to do new E-Tran numbers after midnight on June 30th, at least as it stands right now.
We'd love to have eyes glazed over charts. Katie, what is this?
So speaking of fraud, the Government Accountability Office just yesterday put out a notice that was basically discussing the problems with the PPP program and their concerns about how many changes have happened to this entire program that might lead to an increase in fraud. And so what they recommended is two very general blanket statements. They said they want the SBA to provide more information to state unemployment agencies. They think that would help with fraud. And the other one was to develop and implement some kind of way to identify and respond to the fraud cases that do come to light.
Katie, real quick, why don't you talk about your 2 Fraud Friday stories you've been following?
So this is a shorter one, and unfortunately, there wasn't enough information to make it the main article today. but it's kind of fun anyway. This funeral director applied for a $13 million PPP loan, and on the application, the first application he submitted two. The first bank, he submits one on a business that doesn't even exist, and on the second, it was a business, but not one that he was affiliated with. So this would be a very simple thing to go check, and obviously, I don't think he actually received the funds. He was caught in this case.
He had big projections for the implications of COVID, didn't he?
I have, Chris, in my 30-year career, I've done a handful of funeral homes.
Mm-hmm.
I have never had a funeral home that would have needed that much PPP funding.
That's like that's the size of the Superdome type of funeral home or something. That
should have been a red flag at the very beginning, the size of the loan for a funeral home operation.
Well, and actually that's happened multiple times over the last month with some of our younger folks. They're like, why are you saying that this one's you're worried about it? I'm like, well, look at the type of businesses it is relative to the loan size. That doesn't add up, I mean, that's happened multiple times, and sure enough, 9 times out of 10 are right.
Katie, you did one on the wedding planning, and this one was, again, 0 employees? How many employees did this person?
Yeah, they had no employees. Well, what happened was in 2018, the business actually went under. They stopped paying state franchise taxes, and they went from, I don't even know how many employees they originally had, but they were claiming on these applications to have between 92 and 126 employees, when they had none at the time of this application. And they're asking for 1.7 million, 2.4 million, around there in PPP loan money for wages. Immediately after they received the funds, they go out and they buy a new Tesla, they pay off their mortgage, and they invest the rest of the money.
Chris, this is yet another one where the business type and the size of the loan, it would have been ding, 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 ding. No way a wedding planning business needs that much money for payroll.
That is a lot of employees.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going through the wedding planning stuff right now, and I don't know how you could possibly have 126 employees running at the same operating levels that they were a couple months ago.
Everybody gets a butler and a waitress at the wedding planning.
Yeah, let's go to the questions real quick. Tony asked the question, if a borrower applied for less than they were eligible for in a PPP loan, will they be able to reapply for the difference?
I'm sorry, Tony. Okay, if he applied for less than they were eligible, will that? That's a great question. I would think that if they initially applied with the bank and then followed up with information prior to the decisioning,
yes,
I would think they could resubmit the information to the bank. I think if they apply to the bank and the bank decisions it and submits it to SBA, I'm not real sure what the procedure would look like after that. But Tony, my answer is, as long as they submit the information before the bank decisions it, it's probably okay.
I think technically one of the 21 versions of IFRs that have come out, I think actually required these now to be fully dispersed loans. But I agree with Lance. I think if you can get to your lender, and I actually had this today, somebody who used one payroll company a portion of 2019 and a different payroll company the other, and they didn't submit everything, and they were actually able to reach out to us beforehand, and we're modifying stuff in E-Tran and doing the slightly larger loan amount. But I think you got to get to them before they close, the loan itself.
Chris, Michael asked the question. Yes, the lender can accept a forgiveness application now, but does the lender have the ability to not accept the application if they're not prepared to process the application, he says, in a timely manner, or I would say without guidance?
Well,
That's
the answer to the question.
Go ahead, Lance.
Yeah, because if you go and look nationally at some of the larger SBA lenders in the country, at their PPP web page, most of them are saying right now that the forgiveness portal or the forgiveness page is coming soon. that they're digesting information from SBA.
Yeah.
So there are quite a number of SBA lenders who are not accepting forgiveness applications at this point. So I don't think there's an immediate requirement, although it's time. I mean, applications are probably going to start coming in, but you know, the lender does, if they don't have the ability to accept the applications at this point, that's fine.
Yeah.
Last follow-up question from Raymond. He asked, hey, but what happens if we accept the application, but we don't process it within that 60 days? Any repercussions to the lender?
We don't know of any at this moment. So, yeah.
But it does, the IFRs do state that the lender has 60 days from receipt of the application to decision that. Excuse me.
Yeah, I think Lance, you're 100% correct. I mean, I just don't see anybody really processing forgiveness right now because we don't quite know what.
Yeah,
to
we
do.
had a poll the other day. Some people have processed them. I guess
We don't know where to send stuff just yet.
they just send them in.
And
Yeah.
You know,
Chris, there are people that said they were processing forgiveness, and the only thing I could think that they could possibly do is send it to the appropriate servicing center, whether it be Little Rock, Fresno, or Herndon. But we've not received it, as Chris said, we've not received guidance on where to send forgiveness.
we have borrower guidance. We just don't have lender guidance.
Right.
That's
And Lance and I have gone on record. We may be wrong. We're thinking we'll get that guidance by June 30th. Hopefully Lance and I are right. And we'll see. Chris, you want to weigh in on that? You have a guess?
With PPP, you know how many times I've been burned guessing. I don't know. I don't think there's going to be much forgiveness processed until after the July 4th holiday. How about that?
All right. Well, Chris, thank you very much for joining us. Stay safe.
Thank you.
Katie, good to see you. Lance, I don't see the car moving. What are you doing? Just
I am sitting in a parking lot of my dad's business, and his wireless internet is good enough for us to do this in the parking lot.
Well, it came through very well. So you got to love technology in these interesting times. Hey, thank you for joining us today for the Coleman Report Live and for supporting America's Main Street, one entrepreneur at a time. Thanks a lot.
Have a good weekend.
Take care, everybody. Bye.